You clicked because you want trucks that refuse to die, and that's exactly what this list delivers. 8 pickups, all cheap to buy today, all carrying engines that outlasted machines costing 3 or 4 times more. Some of these are still running past 300,000 miles on their original block. Let's start with the one mechanics themselves buy for their own driveways. Number 8. The Toyota Hilux. Built through the late 1980s and 1990s with the 22R and 3RZ engines. There's a reason this truck became almost mythical. A television crew once tried to destroy one on purpose, dropping it, drowning it, setting it on fire, and it still started. That wasn't a fluke. The block was over-engineered for a market where breakdowns meant stranded villages, not inconvenient tow trucks. Owners today report units crossing 400,000 miles with nothing more than oil changes and timing belts. But here's the twist almost nobody expects. The Hilux wasn't actually the most powerful truck of its era. Competitors outgunned it on paper, more horsepower, smoother ride, better interior. And yet it kept outliving them, one after another, because Toyota built the internals with tolerances tighter than anything in its price class. That mismatch between spec sheet and real-world survival is the pattern you'll see repeat across this entire list, and it gets even more extreme with the next truck. Number 7. The Chevrolet Silverado from the mid-1990s through early 2000s, powered by the Vortec 5.3 and 350 small block. This engine wasn't designed to impress anyone. It was designed to be built millions of times without complications, using decades of small block refinement Chevrolet had already perfected. Fleet operators loved it for a simple reason. When something did fail, parts were everywhere and cheap, and the engine itself rarely needed anything beyond basic maintenance. There's a detail most buyers miss when hunting for one of these today. The early Vortec units, before certain emissions changes altered the internals, are considered the sweet spot by collectors and mechanics alike. Find one with documented maintenance, and you're often looking at an engine capable of outliving the truck's own frame and body panels. That's not an exaggeration. It's the actual failure pattern reported by long-term owners, where rust claims the truck long before the engine gives up. And that raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with for a second. If a truck built on 1990s technology, sold for a fraction of what a modern luxury pickup costs, can survive longer than machines loaded with turbochargers and computer-controlled everything, what exactly are buyers paying extra for today? That question follows us through the rest of this list, and the next entry makes it even harder to answer. Number 6. The Ford Ranger, specifically the early 2000s models running the 2.3-liter Duratec or the older 2.9 V6. This one surprises people because Ford's full-size trucks get all the attention, while the smaller Ranger quietly built a reputation among fleet mechanics as nearly bulletproof. Delivery companies used to run these into the ground on purpose, stacking mileage year after year, and the engines simply kept absorbing the abuse. What made the difference wasn't exotic engineering. It was restraint. Ford kept the internal design simple, avoided unnecessary complexity, and leaned on a smaller displacement that put less strain on every moving part. Less stress, over hundreds of thousands of miles, adds up to years of extra life. Owners who changed oil on schedule and little else have documented these engines crossing 300,000 miles while barely burning a drop between changes. Here's the part that catches people off guard. When Ford eventually redesigned the Ranger with more power and modern electronics, reliability numbers actually dipped for a few model years. More technology didn't mean more durability. Sometimes it meant more things that could fail. That contradiction shows up again and again on this list. And it's about to get even clearer with the next truck, because this next one wasn't even sold as a workhorse. Number 5. The Nissan Frontier from the mid-2000s, built around the VQ40 V6. Nissan borrowed this engine architecture from their sports car lineage, which sounds like it shouldn't belong in a truck at all. But the same qualities that made it rev smoothly and reliably in performance applications made it remarkably resistant to wear undertowing loads. Independent mechanics frequently cite this engine as one of the few V6 truck motors that rarely needs head gasket work, a common failure point in rival trucks from the same era. The conflict here isn't mechanical, it's about perception. Buyers overlooked the Frontier for years, assuming a smaller-feeling truck couldn't compete with bigger American nameplates. Meanwhile, it quietly built one of the strongest long-term reliability records in independent owner surveys, often outperforming trucks with far bigger reputations and far bigger price tags. Number 4. The Dodge Ram with the 5.9-liter Cummins diesel, produced through the late 1990s and early 2000s. This one deserves its almost legendary status. Farmers, contractors, and long-haul operators have pushed these engines past 500,000 miles, and some documented cases go beyond 700,000 with major work limited to injectors and basic wear items. The block itself was built industrial grade from the start, designed more like equipment machinery than a passenger vehicle engine. But even the Cummins had a limitation almost nobody talks about, one tied directly to a component outside the engine itself. That detail changes how you should actually shop for one, and it leads straight into the next truck on this list. The limitation with the early Cummins trucks wasn't the engine at all, it was what sat behind it. The automatic transmission paired with those first-generation 5.9 diesels struggled to handle the torque the engine produced, especially under heavy towing. Owners who wanted true longevity learned to pair that engine with the manual transmission instead, sidestepping the weak link entirely. It's a small detail, but it's the difference between a truck that dies at 150,000 miles and one that just keeps going. Worth remembering if you ever go shopping for one. Number 3. The Isuzu D-Max, sold under different badges depending on the region, running the 4JB1 diesel engine. This one rarely gets mentioned in American truck conversations, but in parts of Africa, Asia, and Australia, it's treated with the same reverence reserve mechanics give the Hilux. Mining operations and remote transport companies have run these engines for decades with minimal intervention, largely because Isuzu built the block using techniques borrowed from their commercial truck division, the same engineering used in vehicles meant to run nonstop for years without downtime. That industrial pedigree explains something curious. Unlike passenger-oriented pickups, the 4JB1 wasn't tuned for smoothness or refinement. It was tuned for survival under constant load, in extreme heat, on terrible roads, with inconsistent maintenance. And that's precisely the environment where luxury trucks tend to fall apart first. Their sensors and complex systems reacting badly to conditions this old-school engine simply shrugs off. Number 2. The Mazda B-series, mechanically twinned with the Ford Ranger but often sold cheaper due to badge perception alone. Running the same durable 4-cylinder and V6 options, these trucks inherited every reliability advantage of their Ford cousin while flying under the radar of most buyers. That obscurity is actually the opportunity here. Nearly identical mechanical durability, frequently at a lower resale price, simply because fewer people know to look for it. Mechanics who've serviced both platforms report almost no meaningful difference in long-term durability between the two badges. The main variable comes down to maintenance history, not manufacturer. That's an uncomfortable truth for anyone who's paid a premium purely for a nameplate. The badge on the hood rarely determines how long the engine underneath actually lasts. And now the truck sitting at number 1, the one that ties every pattern from this entire list into a single machine, is about to be revealed. It combines the industrial-grade durability of the Cummins, the over-engineered restraint of the Hilux, and the underrated reputation of the Frontier, all in one package that regularly gets ignored by buyers chasing shinier options. What it is, and why it earns the top spot, comes next. Number 1. The Toyota Tacoma, specifically the first-generation models built through the early 2000s with the 3RZ and 5EZ engines. This truck sits at the top for one reason. It's the only one on this list that combines nearly every advantage the previous 7 trucks had individually. The overbuilt tolerances of the Hilux, the industrial mentality of the Cummins, the underrated reputation buyers overlook like the Frontier and the Mazda. Consumer Reports has tracked these trucks for years and repeatedly found reliability scores that outperform vehicles costing 2 or 3 times as much, brand new, loaded with luxury features. There's a reason resale values on early Tacomas barely dropped for years, frustrating buyers who watched other trucks lose half their value in the same window. The engine simply refused to become the reason to sell. Timing chains instead of belts, forged internals in key areas, and a cooling system that tolerated abuse most other manufacturers wouldn't design for. All of it added up to trucks still working as daily drivers 2 decades after they left the factory floor. But here's the twist that ties the whole list together. None of these 8 trucks were ever marketed as luxury vehicles. Not one of them had premium interiors, cutting-edge tech, or badge prestige. They were built by engineers who prioritized one thing above comfort, above styling, above marketing appeal. The engine had to survive conditions nobody could fully predict. And in solving for that one unglamorous goal, they accidentally created machines that make 6-figure luxury trucks look fragile by comparison. That's really the core lesson buried in every one of these 8 examples. Durability was never about price. It was about priorities. Somewhere between the 1990s and today, a lot of manufacturers started optimizing for comfort and complexity instead of raw survivability, and buyers paid the price in expensive repairs and shortened lifespans. The trucks on this list represent a different philosophy: simpler, tougher, cheaper to fix, and often cheaper to buy in the first place. If you're hunting for a truck that will still be running long after payments on something flashier would have ended in a breakdown, these 8 names are where the search should start. If this kind of deep dive into what actually makes a vehicle last is useful to you, sticking around for more of these breakdowns is probably worth it. There's a lot more ground like this still uncovered.